For decades, this place has been a magnet for urban explorers, an abandoned giant, hidden deep in the woods, filled with decaying machinery and echoes of a lost industry. Some have dared to sneak in, risking arrest just to get a glimpse inside. But today, for the first time, we're exploring it legally. At the request of local law enforcement, we've been invited to document this place before it's lost forever, before demolition crews erase over 2.5 centuries of history. This mill, once a powerhouse of industry, will soon be reduced to rubble. Not too long from now, everything you see here will be gone, demolished, cleared away, leaving nothing but an empty lot where the mill once stood.
That was your office?
That was my office, electrical superintendent, yeah.
We'll hear from those who worked on the machines, who remember this place in its prime.
You're not a paper maker until you lose a finger.
We'll follow the flow of water from the dam to the mill, uncovering the ingenious system that powered it all. And we'll dig deep into the archives, piecing together a story long forgotten. From the towering chimney to the large warehouses to the overgrown courtyards, the upper floors to the final finishing rooms, this is the complete exploration of a factory frozen in time. This is the collapsing ruins of the Warren Glen paper mill on Part-Time Explorer. The old Riegel Paper Mill in Warren Glen, New Jersey. Once an industrial powerhouse, now a decaying ruin. Since its closure in 2006, it's become one of the most notorious abandoned sites in the region. Urban explorers have been sneaking in for years, drawn by its size, its mystery, and its dangers. But unlike those who came before us, we're among the first to explore it legally. The local police department actually invited us here. This mill is slated for demolition, and before it's gone forever, they want it documented. Years of decay have made the place unstable. Trespassers keep coming, and honestly, some don't make it out. The structure is dangerous. The air inside isn't much better, and even though most people who break in are harmless and just looking for a thrill, there have been rare encounters with others who are less than friendly. Even after operations stopped, the dangers didn't. Over the years, multiple deaths have occurred here. Falls, collapses, and other tragedies have turned an abandoned mill into something even darker. This is the first time anyone has been given full legal access to document what remains on video. And today, we're going inside. Joining me today is my friend David, who you may remember from my Centralia documentary a few years back. Also with us is Scott Schofield, a former employee and one of the last caretakers of this building.
I came here in August of 2000 as an electrical contractor to help with a new installation of the machine. But I guess because I was so involved, they didn't want me to leave. So I actually had my own office here as a contractor with a helper every day. So finally they closed this in April of '06, but they asked me to stay on to oversee the property because we had a lot of environmental issues to take care of.
He knows this place better than anyone and is going to help us make sense of what we're seeing inside.
There.
That was your office?
That was my office, electrical superintendent, yeah.
There's a note in there to Scott.
To me?
Yeah.
Let's see.
Yeah, on that paper clip.
Yeah,
right
that's
there.
my office right there. That's where I used to work out of every day. 2006, the mill closed, but I was here till 2008. But I moved out of there though.
This is Sean Gutsick. This video was actually his idea. He's here as our escort and to join in on the fun. There aren't many plans of this building readily available, but the demolition team let us take a look at what little they had. The first thing that hits you is the size. This place is massive. Its skeletal remains stretching across the Musconetcong River like a forgotten fortress. Even after years of decay, it still commands attention. An industrial giant standing on borrowed time. To reach the entrance, we have to cross this old bridge. It was one of 3 that workers would use to access the mill from this side of the river, but now it's just another decaying piece of history, barely holding together. Like everything else here, it's not exactly in great shape. Before we go inside, we have to take precautions. The air in there isn't just stale, it's bad. Years of decay have turned the air inside into a mix of mold, rust, and industrial residue. Breathing it in unfiltered is not a great idea.
You can get sick very easily. We actually just heard that someone had to go to the hospital earlier today just because of the dead air that's inside. So we're not taking any chances.
All right, it's time to step inside.
Wow.
The first area that we were in upon entering the old mill was known as the finishing room.
So this is the finishing department from back in the day when they take all the finished product from upstairs, they drop it down here and they would wind up and cut it into sheets. So they would do sheeting, packaging, get it all ready for the customer, and then the loading docks, as you can see the light out there. There's 3 loading docks out there. They bring it out there and load it on the tractor trailers. And at one time, this was a full operation right here before 1999. So this was their finishing department, ran 3 shifts. 5 days a week.
The first thing that hits me is the silence. A thick, suffocating kind of quiet. This room, once the final step in a long, complex process, now feels frozen in time. This is where the paper came off the line, was cut, stacked, and wrapped, ready to be shipped out to the world. But today, there's no hum of machinery, no rhythmic clatter of conveyor belts, just the sound of our shoes shuffling and the crunch of debris underfoot.
Everything came from, there was 2 big lines upstairs, line 7 and line 8. All the finished rolls that were being cut and trimmed would come down here to be sent out.
There's a thick layer of dust or silt on the floor. Look at that.
The air is thick with dust, some undisturbed for years, and beneath it I can almost smell the ghost of something else. Ink, chemicals, maybe even the faintest trace of oil from the presses that used to run day and night.
Just always watch for pits. There were a lot of pits back when they had this as a regular mill. So the equipment used to sit on these pits, but now the equipment has been sold, so the pits are still there. So just be careful when walking through.
And they'd often have those pits so you can get under the machinery and service it, right?
Yeah.
These once housed the final pieces of machinery. Some were cutting stations, trimming massive rolls of paper down to precise sizes. Others were industrial stackers, pressing sheets after sheet into uniform bundles. Now they're just open voids, waiting for the careless step of an explorer who isn't watching where they're going.
Freight elevator?
Yeah.
It's dangerous in here. The darkness hides jagged edges, loose wires, and unseen drops. Some of these pits are deep enough to break a leg if you fall in, or worse. Even though the machines are gone, the bones of the operation are still here, and the room still tells its story of industry, of precision, of human hands guiding a process that now feels almost foreign in a world of digital screens and automation.
I saw the notice for the last day of employment still hanging up on there.
What did it say? Where was it?
It was over sort of by the door a little bit.
And here's something else. A paper notice, still barely hanging on. The final day, the last shift. I wonder how it felt for the workers who saw this notice, if they had time to prepare or if the end came suddenly. When they left for the final time, did they know that this place would be left to rot, and their years of labor would become nothing more than dust and ruins? Other notices on the wall give us a look at what life was like at the mill, with some notices going back to the 1980s, talking about workers on strike. It's eerie seeing something like this still here, as if the building itself is holding on to the memory. A last reminder of the people that kept it alive.
So what, that's the punch clock?
Looks like it. Got that old mid-2000s motherboard on it.
Hurricane Sandy is really what did this place in. They wanted to sell this. It looked like they were going to sell it, and then Hurricane Sandy took some of the roofs off, and then the elements got in, and it went downhill really fast.
After the paper was packaged up and ready to ship, it was brought out back to the loading dock. In the mill's later decades, it was loaded onto trucks out this side exit and shipped to anywhere else in the world that Riegel Paper and the later FiberMark serviced.
This is the baling area, so they would take the bales of paper right down this chute here, and it would be all pre-packaged and sent upstairs to be redone into the balers. They put it in the pulper, they take all the cut trimmings, bale it up, and then it would go all the way down the other end and go into the pulpers, and they would reuse the paper again to make new paper. So this is the baling area here for finishing.
Coming off of the large main room of the finishing department are offices and break rooms for the workers of this department. All of their activity at work was contained to their department so that they didn't have to wander the rest of the massive complex.
I can smell that dead air. Just in there, even through the mask. How old's this building? This mill?
So there was 4 mills total in the township. They all vary in age. The first ones are pre-Revolutionary War.
Wow.
I believe this site was one of the pre-Revolutionary War. Kind of local legend goes that during the Revolutionary War, captured Hessian soldiers were forced to work in one of the mills here.
Really?
Yes.
To the left, it's called the drive room. All the motor controls were in this room here, this block room.
Yeah.
And there was starches made down here too. There was all these tanks over here for white and black starch that they would do the dyes to put onto the paper.
The finishing room led right into the roller room. This is where the paper was made. The heart of the operation, a long, cavernous space that once housed the Warren Glen Mill's paper machines, long industrial beasts that stretched nearly the full length of this room.
This was number 8 line over here. That was an old line. The new line that was started being installed in 1999 was put on this side. That was number 7 paper machine, they called it. And that had all modern technology with drive control, instrumentation, had a Foxborough system, it was called, all digital. So that was over on this side.
We're actually walking along the lower level of the roller room. Down here were motors, machines, and other support instruments, but it was on the second level of the room above where the paper manufacturing lines were.
This space was all your motors, your pumps, your vacuum pumps, your all water down here. All your water came through here for all your pumps to spray water up bring water up to the machine, both sides.
I have no idea how old these little parts are. They're all over the place. They're pretty neat. I mean, I would imagine they got to be a few hundred. They're probably 100 years old, I would think.
This here was a motor control center room here. There was this whole wall was filled with starters for motors for both sides, like to turn on and off the motors, to protect the motors. This is all motor control center here.
Standing here now with nothing left but the machine foundations and scattered debris, it's hard to imagine the sheer scale of it all, or the deafening roar of the rollers pressing fiber into form. We ascended a spiral staircase coming out onto the second floor. Here, both of the machines were managed and operated. But to really understand what it was like to work in this room, you have to hear it from someone who was there. James Groover worked at the Warren Glen Mill from 1984 until 1993.
Basically, when you worked on a paper machine, you were like babysitting the machine. And if all the, say if we were making a paper called the electronic board, the specs had to be a certain this and that. Sometimes we got in excess of 300,000 pounds of electronic board. If you got that, that was what we called gravy. You know, the machine usually ran pretty good. You know, you had your breakdowns, but if you could get a run where you had like in excess of hundreds of thousands of pounds of the same paper and the same dimensions of the rolls, you could have that thing on autopilot. The machine I worked on was number 7. We used to get this one, I think it was called battery card stock, and we'd run it for from Monday through Friday. And basically, there were weeks that I worked 8 hours every day, Monday through Friday, and I would, as a backtender, I would turn up a reel every hour, get the samples, and we were good.
The machines were relentless and the work was dangerous.
We did have a fatality while I worked there. He was a supervisor there, and he was a man that I was really fond of. It really wasn't crazy about me initially. He's just took a while to warm up. He was supposed to be on vacation this week. Well, something happened and he ended up having to work 12-hour nights. And I had left at 11 o'clock. At like 3 o'clock in the morning, he had gotten caught on the paper machine that I was working at, trying to thread the machine up with paper, and he was killed. He got caught in one of those big dryers, and it was a fatality. Like I said, it was a very dangerous place to work.
This room, once alive with motion, is now frozen in time. The machines are gone, but the memories remain, etched into the walls, into the floor, into the stories of those who worked here. Lines 7 and 8 took up most of the second floor area. As Scott said, 7 was the newer machine and 8 was the older, dating back to the 1930s or 40s. These machines were the backbone of production, an intricate web of rollers, cylinders, and dryers that transformed raw pulp into finished paper. The process started at one end of the room, where raw material was fed onto a moving mesh belt. From there, it passed through massive rollers, gradually losing moisture layer by layer, until finally emerging as a continuous reel of paper wound around giant cylinders. Above us, the foreman's balcony.
There's the ivory tower.
From up there, he had a clear view of every stage of the production, watching workers keep a close eye on the machines below. The foreman's office. From here, orders were shouted, shift schedules were planned, and problems were solved, or sometimes ignored. This notice, still laying on the floor, is a disciplinary warning issued in one of the last years of operation.
On June 21st, 2005, while you were performing a grade change, you neglected to start debonder to the number 7 paper machines. This oversight resulted in a loss of 3,700 pounds of paper.
Decisions made in this room shaped the lives of hundreds of workers. Long hours, grueling shifts, but steady pay. But nothing lasts forever. The machines fell silent, the workers moved on, and this place, once the beating heart of industry, became just another empty shell. Machine number 7 was a newer one and very efficient, but because number 8 was an older one, it had a larger, more antiquated power plant a few rooms over.
But this is where all the power came into, all right, for number 8 machine. This is the older machine. So all your starters and your motor control were all in here. But this was all high voltage stuff. One year a cat crawled in behind and back and got blown up 2 o'clock in the morning. I came in with a dustpan and brush and put him into a box. It was all gray fur. We had 2 big generators here. I want to say 150 or 50 horsepower each. This is for backup power. So we had 2 big generators. This is the monitoring station for them. And then we had, we used to generate our own power with water wheels. Okay, we used the river up top to generate power. See, the water would have to be running these wheels at 225 RPM and 514 RPM. You would see these gauges go up to your amps, your kilowatts, your volts, and you would have to watch these 2 light bulbs. So when you got up to the right speed and the right voltage, you throw this switch on, and that would sync your voltage 480 to 480. If you missed it, you have to start all over again. But you got to crank these wheels up, watch the RPMs, watch the light bulbs, and then throw it in. It was pretty cool. But these supplied all the air to the machines, you know. These are the big, I said generators, I'm sorry, these are the compressors. These are the big air compressors that gave 90 PSI. You had 2 of them just for constant air pressure throughout the machine, and they were loud down here.
Oh, wow. That's pretty cool. And there's a breeze coming through here, too. That's nice.
What a view.
Yeah, I don't really trust that.
Scott mentioned how they were able to draw power from the flowing river. How they did it was through a long, complicated system. As a paper mill, water was needed not only for the power, but as an actual material step in the process. That's why this mill was built here on the river. To understand just how vital water was to this mill, we need to follow its journey, starting up the stream.
We're taking a walk away from the main mill now, and we're heading east along the river, passing the locks, through the waterworks, and along this raceway that they built for the mill. And we want to see if we can get all the way up to the dam.
This dam was the first step in the process. Built to control the river's flow, it stored and redirected water into a series of canals that once fed the mill below. The power of this dam in its prime was immense, holding back the river, gathering strength, and releasing it with precision.
I'm just marveling at how much infrastructure there is for this mill. We're half a mile east of it, and here we've got the dam, we have all these locks, and there's all sorts of outbuildings along here.
The mill downstream is abandoned and slated for demolition, and now this dam serves no purpose but to hinder the flow of the river. There are serious plans to remove this dam in the next few years. But it's a multi-million-dollar project. From the dam, the water didn't just rush straight to the mill. It followed a carefully engineered path, one that we're about to retrace. This canal was the artery that fed the mill. Water diverted from the dam flowed down this channel, passing through a series of locks like this one. Each lock helped regulate the pressure, ensuring a steady and controlled flow as the water approached the mill. Walking this path, it's easy to imagine what it once was. A maintenance route for mill workers, running alongside the canal that carried water from the dam to the mill. Today, the forest has started to reclaim it, but the public has access to this road even though it's not clearly marked. And it is a popular walking trail for locals. Even now, the remnants of the system remain. Water still collects in some of these locks, though the machines that it once served are no longer down below. Before the water could be used, it had to be filtered. Any debris from the river, such as branches, leaves, or silt, had to be removed. Clean water was crucial, not just for generating power, but for making the very product that the mill was built for: paper. And once purified, the water flowed down two massive pipes, dropping into the mill's water wheel, turning raw energy into mechanical power, and feeding the numbers 7 and 8 machines that we saw earlier.
There's where those two big flumes come down the mountain. They turn this wheel here, and that goes out there. I'll show you what that is. See these pipes here? Here's one, and the other one's here. So this is the end of one water wheel here. That's where that started. The other wheel's in this big pipe up here. You follow that out. That goes to, this is what generated the electricity, and it actually took, when we ran these every day, it took about a third off our utility bill, which is about, I think it was over $1 million a year, and this saved us like $300,000 a year just by running this. A lot of water pressure. But that pipe comes down through here. So this is where the water would end up. And underneath here, it would go back out to the river under the building, and it would go back to feed the lower river here. But this is the big wheel here. You'd have electrical controls over here.
This was old world engineering at its finest, using the simplest of forces to drive an entire industrial operation: water and gravity. But the water's job wasn't done after turning the wheel. It had one more critical purpose. From the moment raw wood pulp entered the mill, water was an essential ingredient. It soaked the fibers, breaking them down into a slurry.
I forget how many gallons. These were called pulpers. That's where they put the bales of paper, mix it with water, turn it into a liquid, and then send it over to the machines. At that other end where the tile chest is, send it to the chest. The chest would send it to there's another opening in the chest there. The chest would send it up to the filter into the machine. But we had 2 or 3 of these tanks. They're called pulpers. Here's another one. Here's one intact yet. This is a big pulper here. They ran like a 500 horsepower motor. Turn these big agitators in there. I heard stories back in the day they'd fill them with water in the summer and they'd go swimming in there.
Without water, this entire process wouldn't have been possible. It shaped the product at every stage, just as it shaped the landscape around us. After serving its purpose in the paper-making process, the water couldn't simply be dumped back into the river. It had to be cleaned once again. Out front is a large circular water tank. This tank acted as a final filter for wastewater. Pulp particles, chemicals, and excess materials were removed here before the water was released, ensuring that the river remained as clean as when it arrived. For well over a century, this mill and this river worked together, a perfect cycle of use and renewal. Water came in, powered the machines, shaped the product, and was returned to the current, ready to flow downstream once again. The Riegel Paper Company is gone. But the river remains, just as it always has, its waters carrying the memory of a time when industry and nature worked hand in hand. The remains of the mill's electrical grid, a large portion of which was hydroelectric, still remain standing above the mill. At times, the mill produced so much power that the excess was used to electrify the nearby communities. When the mill closed down for good, the power was kept on for some time until that was eventually shut down as well. This led to one of several casualties that this mill suffered, even in its abandoned days. On January 1st, 2007, less than a year after the mill shut down, a man named Mark broke into the mill to steal copper. He didn't know the power was still on and ended up getting electrocuted. His belt buckle is still fused to the concrete beneath where one of the substations stood.
Either a step up or a step down system that was here.
Okay.
And people were trying to steal the copper out of it, and it was getting into a waterway. So they had to take it all down. But this was, I don't know where, if it was either step up from the power grid or step down from the power grid, but it was a step up or step down substation that was here. And then this was all the tracks that went through the site.
The substation not only powered Warren Glen and the buildings around it, but also all 3 of the other Riegel mills, some of which were several miles away.
There was 42 telephone poles from here to Hughesville with just a bare wire on it, feeding. One year, I remember we lost power down there. It was raining like heck, and I walked the poles through the woods. A big tree fell across 2 of the lines. So like an idiot, I got a 20-foot 2x4, standing in the grass, and I tried to knock the tree off. Man, I got whacked. Thank God it was through wood and everything, but it hurt my forearms like, holy heck. But I freed it up.
This is the boiler house, the beating heart of the Warren Glen paper mill. Lockers lined the side of the room. This building had a large team of workers. I won't pretend to be an expert on the technical side of these boilers, but I do know one thing. They're massive. Standing tall like an iron giant, it had several furnaces. Some of them are still open, and we could peek inside. Originally, these boilers ran on coal. A railroad spur once ran straight through the central courtyard of the mill, carrying train cars full of coal. The track ran right up to this building where coal was dumped down before being fed into the furnaces. But like everything in this mill, the technology evolved. Eventually coal was phased out, and the boilers were converted to run on oil. And how did they get that new equipment in? Well, that's where things get a bit interesting.
They had a new boiler put in one time when I was there, and they had to fly it in with helicopters because they couldn't go anywhere with it, get in.
The boiler building is massive, at least 4 or 5 stories tall, and the boilers, in the middle, are almost as tall.
Whoa.
The old staircases and catwalks are still here, just waiting to be climbed. So we climbed up to get a better view of the building from the inside.
No way. Nope. That just started sagging right down under me.
Yep.
Alright. Piecing out of here.
Turns out those walkways aren't as sturdy as they used to be. We didn't stick around to find out how much weight they could still hold.
Is this some sort of a press over here?
Certainly looks like one.
Yeah, roll press.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Oh wow, that whole mechanism.
Yeah.
That's an old mechanism too.
Like a blast door here. Why even bother? Oh, it kind
Do
of.
it. A little bit.
Yeah, that's it. Wow. I expected that to be rusted solid.
Right.
This portion of the building has seen better days. Looking at Google Earth, it looks like this portion of the building collapsed sometime around 2017. So about 5 years prior to the filming of this.
Do you know what the oldest parts of the building are?
I think we're standing in the oldest parts of the building.
Back there, or this too?
This here. So this is, the older mills are made out of that, I guess that's like fieldstone.
Mhm.
And I believe that those are the oldest parts, which are like Revolutionary War.
Man, what a shame to see it like this.
Judging by the age of these walls, we're in one of the earlier parts of the mill, likely a portion of the complex that once stood as an independent building, predating even the Riegel Paper Company. and it predates the American Revolution, so it's older than 1775, more than 250 years old, and gives us a glimpse at the beginning of this building's story. This portion of the building itself wasn't initially part of the paper mill. This was probably a grist mill built by German settlers in the 1740s or 50s. During the American Revolution in the 1770s, captured Hessian soldiers were put to work in this mill. Hessians were soldiers from modern-day Germany, so it's no surprise that they were sent to work for a German mill here in New Jersey. A century later, by the mid-1800s, another company was beginning in nearby Finesville that would reshape the future of the mill here at Warren Glen. That was the Warren Manufacturing Company, better known later as Riegel Paper. Not much is available about this company online, so we had to track down the company's autobiography in the rare books section of a library in a completely different part of the state. The Warren Manufacturing Company can trace its roots back to John Riegel. He would take both paper manufacturing and neckbeards to a whole new level. Riegel's family had been in the milling business for generations, and in 1862 he took the first step into paper manufacturing at Finesville, New Jersey, converting an old grist mill into a small paper mill. But this was just the beginning. That mill still stands in Finesville. In 1873, John Riegel, along with several other business partners, officially incorporated the Warren Manufacturing Company. In addition to the Finesville mill, the first one that they built themselves was right here at Warren Glen, harnessing the power of the river to drive production.
Well, then he got enough money to purchase this in 1863, started making paper, and then as you can see, they just kept adding on over the years.
This mill became the cornerstone of a growing empire, and we may be within some of its original walls. Riegel's sons, Benjamin and John, took over the company and expanded it to be one of America's leading paper companies, and by the early 1900s they had 4 different mills in the area: Warren Glen, Hughesville, Riegelsville, and Milford. Workers processed raw materials like jute, rope fibers, and later wood pulp into high-quality paper products. For generations, families worked here, their livelihoods tied to the success of the mills. The Warren Glen Mill stood as a testament to their hard work and ingenuity of its people, operating through the ups and downs of an evolving industry. Around the mill, the town of Warren Glen developed. It was very much a company town, with company housing lining the streets. Many of the homes that stand there today were built by the company for its workers over a century ago. Closer to the plant, within the private property limits of the demolition zone, were houses that needed to be closer to the mill, the homes of the superintendents and the foremen, ready to return to work at a moment's notice.
This might be the foundations for the houses of the superintendents that he was talking about. There is a sidewalk here. There's even a fire hydrant. But this would have had to have been torn down a long time ago, because these are some big trees that are now here. So this could have gone right up to a front door, and then this could be the house. Fairly decent sized house right here, going up to those boulders back there.
And back in the day, across the street here, that was lined with homes. Some of the foundations are still there. So the supervisors would live here, and if they're sleeping and there's a problem, they send a steward out to get the guy and said, hey, the machine broke, you got to come in and fix it. And they used to come in and work all hours, because this is 7 days, 24. They never shut it off. As far as that, I heard there was as much as 1,200 people working here at one time in the 40s, 50s, 60s. So it was all union paper makers, union electricians doing the powerhouse. So it employed a lot of local people over the years, a lot of families.
It was a steady job and one of the only opportunities for industrial employment in the area. Riegel Paper continued on until the 1970s. In 1976, Riegel was acquired by James River, the largest paper company in the world at the time. Strikes did happen. There were several over the course of the later decades of the mill, including ones that shut down full plants.
We were told by one of the big wheels that if we went out, the company went out on strike, that they would close one of our mills down. for spite. If they closed the mill down, they only worked 4 days a week, and they were making money. But it didn't matter. They were going to close one down because they told us. And since that was one of the smallest, or the smallest one, they closed it down.
After years of corporate reshuffling, the mill was leased out in 1991 and eventually sold off in 1995. It changed hands several times before becoming FiberMark in 1997. FiberMark specialized in high-end specialty papers and coatings, and they were planning a $15 million upgrade to this facility at Warren Glen. But behind the scenes, financial troubles were piling up. By 2001, the company was struggling to manage costs, including environmental issues with the wastewater runoff. That water treatment tank that we talked about earlier was built across the river a few years prior, but keeping that operational was difficult and expensive. In 2004, FiberMark filed for bankruptcy protection, and in 2006, they pulled the plug on this mill for good. And just like that, almost a century and a half of papermaking came to an end, leaving behind an empty shell of what once was. The building seems to go on forever. We're climbing up to the 4th floor of this middle section now, to this loft.
Just in a loft now. So what, we're on the 4th floor now? Is that what this is, the 4th floor?
Heavy-duty shelving indicates that this area was likely storage. Old documents are still scattered across the floor. Invoices, receipts, blank forms, a complete mess of the company's history, rotting away along with the rest of the building. This space was truly massive, with a beautiful view of the Musconetcong.
Well, I appreciate you taking us to these places.
Oh, hey, man. This is a lot of fun.
Good, good. I'm having fun too.
The next portion over of the building was dark, despite a large wooden tower in the roof above. A shutter flapped in the wind, letting in little bits of light as we explored. Next was the beater room, an early stage of the papermaking process, where wet fibers were broken down further to produce a smoother pulp.
One of the guys that ran, it's called the beater room upstairs where they did all the mixing, he asked Dan if there's any memorabilia he could get. So I found an old sign on how to mix a certain product on the wall in a wooden frame, so I gave it to him. And I gave him his old phone with an extension on it.
Oh, wow.
Mike, he's a good friend of mine. He worked here for probably 35 years.
The wooden beams overhead are said to have all been hand-cut and assembled without a single iron nail. The trusses are all held in place simply by gravity and friction. This portion of the building likely dates to Riegel's early days, so around the 1860s. Deep beneath the mill, it feels like we've stepped into another world, more like the underground vaults of Edinburgh than the hills of central New Jersey.
Yeah, I could see this cloud in here.
The foundations stretch out in every direction, arched doorways, crumbling stone, the remnants of a forgotten labyrinth.
Oh, man. Something's been patched up.
Some Amontillado, of course.
Yes.
Whoa.
No, thank you.
Standing water is everywhere, a real hazard for explorers. Beneath the surface, rusted metal, and who knows what else waits for anyone careless enough to step in the wrong place, not to mention the bacteria. And then there's this, a ladder leading even deeper below the foundations. Into what exactly? No idea. But one thing's for sure, we're not climbing down to find out.
Oh, I can smell that air. Whew.
You see that?
Haze.
Well, I'm not sticking around.
I'm not either. I'm getting hazy.
How about we get some fresh air? In the center of the mill is a courtyard, swallowed by time. We've seen glimpses of it already from different windows overlooking it, but now, let's take a stroll through what is now, in essence, a garden. It's been overtaken by lush greenery, as if the forest itself is trying to pull the mill back into the earth. Beneath our feet, a labyrinth of pipes once fed water, steam, and chemicals into the different buildings. Overhead, a raised railroad trestle stretches across the courtyard. When the mill was coal-fired, this is where the train cars came in, rolling in from outside to deliver fuel straight to the boiler house. Some stretches of track still remain in fairly good condition.
They creosoted those beams very well. That's what they used to treat railroad wood.
Ah,
Is creosote.
interesting.
As a matter of fact, when they banned creosote everywhere else, they gave the railroads an exception.
No matter which way we look, the mill towers over us. Walls of brick and steel stretch stories high, their windows shattered, their frames eaten away by time. But nothing is more imposing than this. This enormous chimney was the exhaust system for the boilers. Everything that burned inside that powerhouse vented through here, pumping thick smoke into the sky for over a century. But now it's barely holding together, already crumbling at the top. Like everything else here, it's slowly falling apart, but for now, it still stands, one of the last great reminders of just how massive this operation once was. So far, we've seen nearly every step of the paper-making process, except for the beginning. Most of the structure on the east end is made up of large warehouse spaces. This is where the raw material arrived. In the early days, that material came in by rail. A freight line ran from the east, stopping here at Warren Glen to drop off shipments of pulp, chemicals, and other supplies. But the tracks didn't end here. They stretched 2 miles further to the Hughesville mill, keeping both operations supplied. Eventually, like most of the industry, the mill phased out rail transport. The tracks were ripped up and truck bays took their place. The same deliveries kept coming, just on 18-wheelers instead of boxcars. Now these spaces are almost completely empty, just echoes of the supply chain that once never stopped moving.
There's a chest, this is a tile chest it's called. See how the tiles are all laid in there? This is where they'd store the pulp to run onto the machine. The machine was right above this. So they would mix their pulp in here, have it all ready to go. You know, paper starts out as a liquid. Then they put it on the felt sheets and the filter, and then they would start running. So this was the beginning of the machine right here underneath it. The main machines were right here, that's where they started.
Next, we're moving to the southwest corner of the structure. Out here, away from the noise of the machines, we find something a little different. a modular office space. It was added in the later years of the mill's operations.
Probably they used the actual office space that was allocated for something else and then was like, oh no, we can't use this for office space anymore. Let's just put trailers in.
Yeah, that's what happened.
If the rest of the mill feels frozen in time, this place is stuck in the 70s. Wood-paneled walls and remnants of office furniture that hasn't been touched in years. This was likely the administrative hub, where paperwork was shuffled, schedules were made, and the business side of the operation kept running. It's not the most exciting part of the mill, but even here, you can still feel the history. Not every part of the mill was massive machinery and roaring furnaces. Some of it was just this: quiet, ordinary, and now completely moldy.
It was very dangerous. I remember when I first started there at Milford, a fellow said to me, he said, "You're not a paper maker until you lose a finger." And I said, well, I guess I ain't going to be a paper maker then, because I ain't losing any fingers.
They were safety conscious, but it was very easy to get. I saw a guy's arm go right in the machine and get rolled up and just shrunk down to nothing because he got his arm pinched in there and couldn't shut it off fast enough.
One accident where a guy come down off the mountain, the tractor trailer, and he hit the bridge, and then he flew out of the truck and into the water. It was ice cold. It was winter time. I don't know, it was February maybe. And the superintendent of the mill came out of the mill. His name was Joe Judge, and he dove in the water to get the gentleman. But he was already dead. And I can't remember how many years later, they had another truck come down the hill and went bad. He crossed the bridge, and then he went down over the top and hit a pole. He died.
No doubt about it, this place was dangerous. But for all the hardship, all the danger, there was something else too. Something that kept people coming back year after year.
I was told, I didn't see it, but back in the 50s and 60s, there were people lined on this bridge with their lunch pail ready to go to work, waiting for someone to die or retire, quit, get fired, whatever. And they would just line up waiting for a job because everybody wanted to work here.
This place wasn't just a job, it was a second home. And like any home, it was filled with moments of humor, camaraderie, and the kind of moments that only come from working side by side, day after day.
I've seen a lot of good things though too, like they would celebrate your birthday with a cake, you know. The human resources people were really nice. Environmental, we had a nice environmental team.
For over a century, the Warren Glen paper mill wasn't just a factory. It was the people, like the names in this binder. Workers, suppliers, clients, contractors, each one of them a part of the network that kept this place running. Lockers still lined with stickers, inside jokes, and reminders of long shifts.
I'm willing to bet that this employee's name was Tom Cruise. And this was probably the joke that, like,
Yeah.
everyone was giving him.
Tom, and they called him Tom Cruise.
Yeah.
Some of these belong to men who spent their entire careers in this building, decades of their lives sealed inside these brick walls. And behind those lockers is this beautiful room. By the way, if there's ever a collapse of society, this loft overlooking the river would be where I'd set up my camp. Don't visit me.
Here's where I used to make the egg sandwiches. That was the best room there. We got our breakfast from there.
Each department had its own break room, each with its own nickname, its own personality.
They have all the Peppermint Lounge. They had all these names for these little clubs they had where they go on break and stuff. But I remember the Peppermint Lounge, there was Bullpen, there was all kinds of names for these things.
Oh, wow. Oh, man. I wonder if this is one of the ones that he had a name
I
for.
would imagine it would be, yeah.
This wasn't just a job, it was a second home. The place where stories were told, friendships were built, and shifts were survived, one cup of coffee at a time.
Coming here at 2, 3 in the morning, the guys in the maintenance shop, hey, you want some coffee? Nah, I don't drink it, you know, and then I started drinking it, and I got hooked on it.
It was an imperfect place, a hard place, but for nearly a century and a half, it was a part of this community. Families were raised on paychecks earned inside these walls. Lives were shaped by the routine of the mill, and now, it is all coming to an end. The exploration that we've been watching so far took place in June 2023, and almost immediately afterward, the demolition began. Progress on the demolition was slow due to environmental concerns. Some of the structure contained chemicals and pollutants, so the building had to be removed in small pieces so as not to contaminate the river. I visited the site in late December of that year, 6 months after our tour, and little progress had been made. Wrecking equipment was on site, but silent at the time of my visit. What had been partially torn down, however, was this area. It was adjacent to what we believed to be the oldest portion of the mill, an area that we briefly explored 6 months earlier. That beautiful old door with the rusted double mechanism was gone. The roll press was gone. I wonder if any of these items had been salvaged before the building was torn into. A bridge used to span between the finishing room and this wing of the building. We walked through it to get this stunning view of the courtyard out the window. In fact, the window frame that you see hanging on by just one side was the window that we stood at. It's funny, I only spent 1 day exploring here, and now I feel like I have a bit of history with the place, and a sense of sadness seeing this place being torn down. I can only imagine what this must feel like for the people who spent every day working at this mill alongside friends and family. How do you feel about it being torn down?
I don't like any industry being stopped because, you know, God forbid they put another warehouse up. I mean, it's all we got is warehouses. This whole world's being taken over by a warehouse. How many can you have? You know, but I don't like it being taken down. I hate to see it. I hate seeing it close in 06. You know, a lot of people made their livelihood here, you know, bought their homes, their cars, their families, I mean, everything. I hate seeing it torn down, any business.
I remember when I was a young boy going down to the paper mill. I love my father, obviously, respect him. And when I think of the paper mill, one of my first thoughts has always been my dad.
I came back again in September of 2024, well over a year after our first tour. Much of the building was still standing, but progress had been made. The loading dock down in the finishing department was reduced to rubble, but the debris had not yet been cleared away. It was difficult to say what remained of the structure beyond the rubble, but everything visible from the street appeared as it was when we first visited. Notably, the chimney remained standing, but the loose bricks at the top had fallen. Whether this was done intentionally or not is beyond me. March 2nd, 2025. The mill has been almost completely demolished. The entire structure has been reduced to rubble and is in the process of slowly being cleared out. I recognize some of the now exposed floors that were once hidden in the darkness when we explored almost 2 years prior. Nothing remains of the finishing department except the outline of the floor. Even the machine pits that once posed a danger had been filled in to give the wrecking gear a safe, even work surface. The rolling room was gone. The boiler house once stood here, now in ruins, and the boiler's gone. One block of the building remains somewhat intact. This area was home to a lot of the preparation work for the raw material before being put onto the rollers. It was once 4 stories high. The top floor was the loft that we explored with the large glass windows along the high walls. The floor partially remains, but the room was now gone. The iron window frames lie twisted on the floor. The 3 bridges remained, spanning across the river, and in the midst of the destruction, the brick chimney still stands defiantly over what was once the proud paper mill. This may end up being the final part of the building to be torn down, the last sign of the beloved company that once supported the entire region. And just like that, it's gone.
A lot of people that worked at the paper mill didn't realize how great of a place it was to work. That's my opinion. I'm not bashing anybody. I think years later, after the mill shut down and they had gone on other jobs, they realized how wonderful a place it was to work.
For nearly 150 years, this place was more than just a mill. It was a livelihood, a second home. Generations of families worked here, their days measured in the hum of machines and the rhythm of hard work. After almost 150 years of papermaking and over 250 years of industry on this site, this area is returning to nature. Like all things, it had its time, and its time has passed. The Warren Glen paper mill may be gone, but the people, their stories, their work, those things don't just disappear. Thank you for taking the time to explore the history of this old paper mill in central New Jersey. And of course, thank you to our sponsor, Hungry Minds Books, and The Book, The Ultimate Guide to Rebuilding Civilization. A special thank you to my supporters on Patreon, especially Marlo Perez, Kelly Black, Kaiser Wilhelm II, Kaiser Friedrich III, Zach Richards, Donald Anderson, Cody Henricks, Joan Haynes, Sean Kimball, Glenn Biddiscombe, Stephen Schwankert, Gabriel Colomb, RGB, Tara Mollikar, Keith Holland, Rob M., Amos Mayhew, Corey Andrews, Nicholas Masella, Cole Tannick, Sophie Baber, Rob, Oliver Chin-Chen, John Maluski, David Watipka, Tiffany Raridan, Mad Time Media, Nathan Gutierrez, Max Metcalf, David Littlejohn, Sean Sahi Frazier, Nikki Chan 92, Corbin McDonald, Matthew Burns, Goblin of the Salt Plains, Luke Stevens, Gordon Robbins, Aaron Stark, Troy Wentworth, Clarkey, Sam Forker, Busy Bee, Christopher Rosendale, Road Weary, Kitty Bits, Taniel 38, Kenzo Buick, Brian Reedy, Eden Cleefish, Bless Moles, Coda Yoda 16, Carol Adams, Clay Hobbs, Steve Valley, Gojira's Trains, J.C. Hobbs, High Treason, The Peppermilk, Tristan White, Jason Stray, Chance Hudson, Robert Mayer III, Jordan Page, The Handler, Georgia Tsifa, Drew Shelton, Craven Moorhead, Jennifer and Sarah Vaughn, Ben Reese, Kenneth Hendricks, Aaron Prochaska, David Douglas, and Alan and Modesta Searlone.